Hi students, this is the first video that you should be watching for Principles of Biology for Wednesday, January 11th. And there are going to be 4 of these videos that I'm going to be using for the scope of life. And so this one is 1 out of 4. And this is probably going to be a review of things that you have already heard in previous biology classes, but maybe I can put a different spin on it for you. So I like to introduce this section about what do we consider life and what are the qualities that we consider life to have by having you imagine or recall stories that you may have read about the search for life on other planets. So normally I would show a little video here about people finding evidence of water on Mars, and that water, if you could find it, might indicate the possibility of life. So imagine if someone were to find alien life or life on another planet, what would be the criteria that we would apply to that possible life form to determine, is it actually alive? And so I'm next going to go through the things that your book lists as the criteria for being alive. So the first one that is often listed as a property or a criteria associated with life is order. Things that we consider alive tend to show some kind of order. It can be symmetrical order, like you see in this pine cone. It can be order of function. It can look like sometimes design to us. And for those of you who are watching this that went to King, if you will recall back to Foundations of Christian Thought, that one of the themes is that God creates order out of chaos. Order happens to be one of our criteria for life. The second one is regulation, and you may have heard this one called a different term called homeostasis. It's one word. I just didn't have room to write it all in one line. Homeostasis. So ask yourself, what does that mean? And that particular quality is basically the ability to self-regulate. Again, running out of room to write. Let me scooch this over. The ability to self-regulate, or the ability to keep the inside of the organism different in some ways from the outside world. So to maintain different internal conditions than external conditions. Third set of criteria, and this one I have a little bit of a quibble with. Growth and development. So growth means, in some ways, we can think of growth as just getting bigger. Is it getting bigger? We as people definitely grow and get bigger as we proceed through life, but not every organism really gets a lot bigger during its lifetime. Also, development, what that term specifically means is in some way a change in form, or the development of new form or new body part or new different region of the organism. That one also is a little bit different if we're talking about the really smaller organisms like bacteria, especially bacteria, which I'm a big fan of. But most organisms probably show some form of growth or development. All organisms definitely show energy processing, and sometimes you will see this one referred to as metabolism. So, break something down and use the parts to build something up. You'll notice through the semester that my R's and V's look the same. It's a R. That says break down, build up. So relating that to us, we eat food, we digest it, we get energy out of it, we use the building blocks that we got out of the food to build new parts of our bodies that allow us to grow and develop. Oops, I didn't mean to make that weird red mark there. Maybe one of my favorite things to teach about life is this concept of life responding to the environment. So if you think about this in regards to little kids, how they know if something is alive or dead, they will look for movement. Now you'll notice that movement is not on the list of qualities that are required for life, because it's not. But if they see some, let's say a possum that's playing dead, it's not moving, what do you do next? You might poke it with a stick if you're mean. And when you're doing that, you're trying to see if the possum is going to have a response to the environment. For those of you who are international, what I'm just now talking about is an animal that we have here called opossum, and most people just call it possum. And it tends to play dead when it's scared. So if an organism is not in any way responding to the environment, that probably indicates that it's not alive anymore. If it's not detecting what is in the environment, process that information, and in some way respond to it, it might not be alive anymore. It might be dead. So response to the environment is also really important for maintaining that internal regulation or maintaining homeostasis. Okay, next one, reproduction. Think about this one in this way. We as people usually have a choice about reproducing. If we choose not to, that doesn't mean that we're not alive. All of these really are that the organism has the capacity to do those things. So if we were to find a new life form on Mars, one of the things that scientists would want to figure out is, how does it reproduce? Is it capable of reproducing a new organism? As people, we have a choice about that. We have choices about that. Let's just say we have choices. And then the last one is evolution. And this one, probably we need to put on it the qualifier that there is a capacity for a group of organisms to evolve. Single organisms on their own don't evolve. Populations evolve. So a population of new items that might be alive, one thing that we want to look at is to see, would it have the capacity for the population to change over time or to evolve? And that's hard for us to imagine if the organism doesn't have DNA or genes of some type. And I'll come back to that later in the class. Okay, I want to use one slide just sort of from the next section to show another important point about life. Everything that we consider to be alive that we know of so far consists of one or more cells. So life as we know it is cellular. And if you've ever heard that viruses are not alive, one reason they are not considered alive is that viruses are not cellular. They are particles. They can reproduce with the help of a host cell, but they are not cellular. So all life is cellular. Life needs to have the characteristics that I just talked about, and that list of characteristics is something that you should go ahead and memorize. So start memorizing that list. The next section that I'm going to talk about has to do with the levels of life organization. And that's what this slide is about. The levels of life organization. That's a G. And we are going to, during this course, start from the end of this list and work our way upward as we go through the semester. All life is cellular. If you want to understand cells, you have to understand their parts, and to understand their parts, you have to understand their building blocks. So this part here is going to be chemistry, and we will look at how molecules build up to form cells. Cells form tissues, tissues form organ systems. For some organisms, like this big iguana or whatever this is here, they have organ systems and organs. If we're talking about bacteria or fungi, they don't have organ systems and organs or tissues. They're just cells on their own. But groups of organisms can be formed into populations, populations into communities, and on upward. And I'm going to talk about that in the next video.